Hello and welcome to another episode of Foggy with a Chance of Seagulls. My name is Clark. As always, I'm joined by my buddy and pal, Evan Lindsay. A lot going on. Excited to record with you. It's Wednesday morning. We have a new starting pitcher we may have signed. Not sure if those listening know what we're talking about. Just kidding, I'm sure you do. A Giants legend has left the organization. We're going to talk about that. But first, we had Major League Baseball opening day today, even though the Giants don't have their opener for another week. What is MLB doing, Evan? What are they doing? What is you doing?
I feel like this is kind of like a soft launch for the season, and I've seen it maligned. You know, it's an early start time. It's an inconvenient start time for people to watch. But honestly, I know you watched a lot of it. I just caught up on some clips, but I honestly, I think it's cool. Do you know what I mean? Like Chan-Ho Park throwing out the first pitch. Like there's so many big Asian players on both teams. And even though it's our two division rivals, I enjoy it. And honestly, I'm just happy baseball's back.
Amen, brother. I completely agree. Thank you to Insomnia for allowing me to watch the game this morning. Although it is 9:30 when we're recording in the morning, and it feels like it's 2 in the afternoon. So today gonna be a struggle. But no, it was fun. I caught the entire introductions and the first 5 innings until I ended up passing out on the couch. But yeah, it was fun. It was a good game too. I was also shout out to John Boy Media. I was watching their live stream, which was so much more entertaining than Eduardo Perez and the other guy who I can't remember what his name is. Their broadcast was so unfun. I had it low volume and then I muted it when they had Rob Manfred on. And
my king.
And honestly, Jimmy, who is John Boy, was killing it during that. He was analyzing the pitch types. At one point, he shouted out Darvish, who in the first run through the Dodgers lineup threw 7 different pitches, 7 different pitch types. And so he was on it and describing that. And it's this is what I want a broadcast to be. I don't need to hear, they had so many cuts to Shohei's new wife, which great, happy for him. Do that in the pre-show. We don't need that during the game as much. Not to go all Taylor Swift controversy from NFL, but I've
been Taylor Swift. I am a Taylor Swift hater, that's for sure. But I've been a Darvish hater over the years, just because he's obviously uber talented, but he's not a super consistent pitcher in my mind. But there was that clip that was going around of the ump cam of a 95 mile per hour 2-seam, and it's that's unhittable. Props to him. And I'll say too, this is an exciting week for Giants baseball because these are two teams where we're right in it with them now. Obviously, the Dodgers are a cut above, but big things have happened. And should we jump into the Blake Snell signing? I much maligned his facial features in our last week's episode, and seeing his weird little insect-like face in the Giants uniform, I maintain the same feelings. But wow, what a deal by Farhan Cooked. Can you flash the t-shirt if you don't mind? I think it's time to bring it back. I think we can, Farhan, with confidence, say that in Farhan we trust.
We've been.
How are you feeling about this signing?
I feel great. I think, to me, what's been really interesting on kind of a national level is this signing has done what I think I've been very excited for already with this season coming up, but it's done that for national media people who are now the Giants are a legitimate playoff team. We're where do they stack up? The Athletic had a breakdown ahead of the Dodgers-Padres series that started today, breaking down the NL West. They're going to break down every division. And they had the Giants with the second most projected wins. But in hilarious fashion, Jim Bowden had us 4th in his little thing. It's a good thing to check out, but it was funny. He gave grades to starting pitching, bullpen, depth, offense, all this stuff. And the Giants got C plus and grades, B minuses. Yeah.
He gives grades 10 times during the offseason. It's like, why don't we wait to the end?
Right. Well, the Giants were getting D's in everything for their offseason. Now it's like, oh, they get an A for the offseason. It's like, yeah, because it was incomplete. Yeah. So that's my kind of initial thought of it's been interesting to see people now be like, oh, the Giants are serious. Where I think everything they've done this offseason was very serious. But this, in terms of national, and I think some Giants fans now finally, even though it's an opt-out contract, don't allow people to opt out of thinking they're a good team. That was a bad joke. I'll let you go.
I wish I had the boo sound effect loaded up on the soundboard. But I mean, it's a steal of a contract at the end of the day. It's like, it's exactly what we were kind of talking about with the Chapman deal. It's very analogous to that. Farhan cooked. Boras is cooked. I don't know if that will be true long term, but I mean, it's 2 years, 62. I believe 15 of that is deferred until 2026.
17. Basically, they took a page out of the Ohtani book, and this year's only a 1 year, $15 million deal on the books.
There's a chance Snell sticks around longer if they work an extension or something, but I would say that Chapman's much more likely than Snell, if any of them do. This really does feel like Rodon type deal, and I love it. And I think to your point about the national media like being like, oh, now I'm in on the Giants. Listening to Chris Rose and Trevor Plouffe talk about it this morning, and they're in now, and it's interesting to examine because obviously it's just like it's a high profile signing for the Giants, which we haven't honestly been able to really make in a while. Like, we're excited about Lee, but I think that there's still skepticism from the league, and like I think since Samardzija and Cueto, like we haven't really made this big of signings in the national media sphere. So it makes sense that like it would take that for them to see us. And when we look at this offseason, there's a lot of pain early on with Yamamoto and Ohtani not going to us. But in retrospect, as we've discussed, it was never going to happen. And so the way that the Giants become interesting is kind of a little bit quantity over quality, which isn't to say that these signings haven't been quality. I think they've all been quality, and this is an offseason for the ages for Farhan. I think to like be pushing into the luxury tax really excites me as a fan.
Oh, I love a good luxury tax.
But like, it's just why I think that it works so well. Also, shout out to your Substack. You did an article about why Snell doesn't fit much as you did why Chapman doesn't fit, and then we signed them both. But you know, the jinx worked, and why he works on this team so well to me is because it really does a lot of things for our rotation that are positive beyond just him being there. We're high on Harrison. You know, I'm pretty sure I can speak for you on that.
Big time.
But it puts him, it doesn't immediately expect that he's a number two, which I think he well could be, but it puts a little bit of pressure off him, puts a little pressure off Hicks to immediately step up and be amazing, puts pressure off Cobb to like come back opening day. And I think that it just really like lengthens our staff a little bit. I think if there's anything that we haven't addressed this offseason, it's been just kind of filling in the long man role, kind of the relief things. But I think that it shifts some of those young guys into being able to like take that role that like Manaea and Stripling and all those guys were taking last year. And I think I'd much rather see Keaton Wynn and Mason Black and, you know, Beck when he's back and Jelly take those more bulk innings because, you know, obviously the book on Snell is that he doesn't go long, but I love it. I love it. I love it at the price. Like, it's any team in the league could have done this, I think. And so I'm so stoked on it.
Everything you said, I agree with. I think that point you just said too is, how were the Giants the only team that could offer this? And I think there are a couple factors here where Snell is a West Coast guy. His wife is pregnant right now.
Right.
So I think staying somewhat close to home. The Mariners have announced this year that they don't have money and they cut costs. And, you know, that's how we ended up with Robbie Ray in a sense and all this stuff. So it wasn't going to work out for him to go to Seattle. I heard Pavlovich in the Giants Talk emergency pod talk about how he was pretty much certain he was going to be an Angel.
Right.
And I'm curious to see if more information comes out about the Angels either kind of not giving him what he wanted, or him ultimately being like, I don't know if this is an organization that actually is going to win and help me. And now that the Giants signed Chapman, Nick Ahmed at shortstop, Tyro Wade, Lee in center, our defense and ballpark are so attractive. And so with all these factors, I think it's kind of hilarious that the shift with the narrative is now why San Francisco was a place that a free agent would want to go. Because when Ohtani didn't sign with us, the whole conversation was the exact opposite. And you and I knew that was a farce and not representative, but the kind of media train really took off with it. And I think it's so funny that within the same offseason, the exact opposite storyline is happening. And do people have no shame? No. But I find that part really interesting.
When I saw the Angels reports, I was like, I mean, that's boring, but like makes sense for the Angels. They have money to spend. Why not do it? I think that they probably dropped the ball on this as they've been dropping the ball for the last decade in their organization. But whatever, dude. He's on the Giants now. I'm happy about it. When I think, again, back to your point, it kind of is just like the exclamation point on the offseason. I think that we were like making a statement, but it was kind of just like, we're the Giants and we're here. And then Snell comes in and it's like, we're the Giants and we're here. And I think it's like, it's making people pay attention. And I think like, what more could we have asked for in this offseason? As far as the on-field product, we'll get to the off-field product too. But, to get two of the marquee free agents, and it shows two parts of Farhan and the front office and what we're doing right now. Chapman and Snell were hugely opportunistic in the way that we went about it. Chapman a little bit less so, but Snell is very much like, I think on Giants Talk they mentioned too, like the parallels to with Harper. It was like they jumped in on him just because it was like, nobody's going in, let's make an offer, whatever. You might argue that they should have been in earlier, but I think it's a great balance of that, seeing, Solaire's out there, he'd be a good fit for us. And then we also like had Lee in our sights the whole time, and we closed the deal
overpaid
and,
to make sure
so to
came.
speak.
Yep.
Exactly. And it's even better than we could have imagined, because at the beginning of the offseason, we didn't anticipate that we'd be able to like essentially get these 1-year contracts for these marquee guys. Yeah. And now we have that. We're not leveraging the future. We're not like blocking, these young pitchers long term. We're just giving them a little bit extra time. I'm coming around a little bit on Ahmed too. I think that like just giving Marco a little bit more time to be seasoned
will accept you, my friend. Ahmed made a really slick play at shortstop. I didn't watch any of the game, but I saw the highlight, and it's just, I mean, the infield defense has to matter for a guy like Snell.
Seeing, I saw that highlight from Chapman last night too, just like off balance, chucking it. And it's like, that reminds me of like when we play Arenado, and I'd be like, that's a hit. That really has changed things. I'm really glad to see Lee and Bailey back in the lineup today.
Yeah.
I wasn't too concerned, but like, the season is getting closer. But I'm really happy to see them back. And it just feels like such a complete team to me. And it hasn't like gone against that idea of kind of like really gearing up for like going for it in the next few years, while giving us such a competitive product on the field.
I love the idea of this being an exclamation point move. I completely agree with that. And I want to take a second just to list out who we've added and subtracted. Last year we were recording, and at one point in the summer, we were the third best team in the National League. And it's hard to remember that because of how the season ended. And again, Pavlovich was talking about the Diamondback series last year. One of the beat writers was talking about the Diamondback series in early September last year. And it was like we were neck and neck. We lost 3 of 4 and looked bad the entire way. And that basically was assigned to the entire team, that we just didn't have the juice. And so this year, we've shown that is not acceptable. Farhan came out and was like, This is a team that should be in the playoff conversation every year. Being below 500 is unacceptable. And people kind of roasted him for it. It's like, okay, well, that's what you're doing, you know. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the positions that we upgraded. So the outfield, I think, entirely upgraded. Obviously, Lee comes into center, which moves Yaz to right field and Conforto to left. Each of those positions, by virtue of Lee being in center, is improved. Defense, offense, all of it. Infield, we talked about it. Third base is improved. No matter what Ahmed brings us and then what Luciano might be able to bring us in the second half of the year, I think shortstop is improved because it was a legendarily awful position last year. We got like negative WAR from our shortstops last year. Backup catcher. I love Blake Snell. I'm excited for his time as a Giant, but Tom Murphy is an upgrade over Blake Snell.
He could swing that stick, by the way.
He can swing it. And one thing too, with like Bailey being out, I'm so much less concerned about how we deal with the catcher position. And last year, again, I thought Sable had a great year, all things considered.
Yeah.
For a rookie who is more or less learning the catching position at the big league level. And he's going to be a good Giant for a number of years. The dude can hit, but he's going to be in AAA this year. And we'll play some catcher, play some outfield, DH. You know, we'll see what happens with Joey Bart. I think he is going to get the JD Davis treatment, but we've improved at those spots.
Just on Sable quickly too, like let's really appreciate that this is a Rule 5 guy that like performed well enough in the majors. He was our starting left fielder last year to stick around, and then now we have 5 options on him, you know, a bunch of optionality on him, which makes him like even more useful as a piece. He'll definitely like get some time this year to fill in for XYZ person. But I mean, we're doing great on the thing. And also, once again, shout out Joey Bart for like being a real one and just continuing to like continuing to
professional
play. And yeah,
totally agree. And then that was just the offense. The pitching side, I think you can say very confidently we've improved our 2 through 5 spots in the rotation. We've got Logan, who had a great year. I expect him to have another great year. But I mean, Cobb moving down to, when he's healthy, being our 3rd or 4th starter. Harrison, when everyone's fully healthy, being our 4th or 5th starter. Snell, Robbie Ray, Jordan Hicks. I mean, we've got 6 dudes who are like, I feel confident with them every time they go out there and pitch. And then we've got Keaton Wynn, Mason Black, you mentioned it already. Like, the beauty of Snell and Ray coming in is that they're not going to block anyone, but they're going to give people time to just work on their stuff. I'm kind of astounded by just how much this team makes sense, because as we've been recording podcasts this offseason and talking about the team, it has never really made total sense. We've basically been saying, you know, they want to do their best this year, but they're gearing towards 2025. And this was such a great way to show, no, we're going to compete every year as best as we can. But we want to, you know, we're not going to trade Luciano and Harrison just for a rental. You know, we're not going to make rash decisions. And the market fell into our laps, and I'm super impressed with what the offseason looks like now.
Yeah. Where do you think this puts us in the NL West now? Because it's a pretty crowded picture, minus the Rockies, who have just taken the last few years off. Everybody else is going for it, you know, Padres with the Cease trade, like everybody's right there. Like, where do we stand?
Yeah, it was interesting watching the Dodgers and Padres today. I think both teams are flawed. The Dodgers, you can't really compete with a Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman lineup. But like after that, they've got Will Smith and Muncy, who are great players, but like I don't think they would necessarily improve our team. I mean,
yeah,
Will Smith is a better hitter than Bailey, but Bailey's a better fielder. You know, I mean,
yeah,
I'm not trying to say Bailey's a better player. Jason Hayward and Mike Yastrzemski are not that different talent-wise.
Yeah.
Jung-Hoo Lee and James Outman are probably not different talent-wise. I think I believe that Jung-Hoo Lee by the end of the year will be considered better, but We got to see it. Their rotation is, Glasnow and Yamamoto, who neither one have the pedigree of Webb or Snell at this point. They both have the potential to be better than those guys, but I think that's like generally kind of a wash. And then it's like a lot of spare parts and injured guys and hoping for guys to come back midseason in their rotation. Their bullpen is super banged up. So I'm not saying the Dodgers aren't winning the NL West. I think they obviously have the most talent. But I think with them, the Padres are starting a rookie in center field. Tyler Wade was a huge part of their offense today, which not a great thing for the Padres. And the same with them. They have a really good top of their rotation, but I think the Giants have such better depth. And we've seen in past years, 2021 being the best example, depth can really help you throughout a regular season. And I don't want to discount the Diamondbacks because obviously they improved their team this offseason after making the World Series. But, I think all four teams have a legit chance to win the NL West, I think, this year. And setting out with that goal, which is exciting and wild and scary because we've also got the Phillies and Mets and Braves and Cardinals, Cubs, Brewers. I mean, the Reds. The National League playoff chase is going to be wild this year. I'm also fascinated, and I have a question for you, Evan, although I have my own thoughts too. But obviously, we're talking about how, competitive the NL West is, or the NL in general is going to be. Speaking specifically now that we have Snell, where do you think our rotation stacks up with the rest of, Major League Baseball in general, but in particular the National League?
We have to be in conversation for like having one of the best. You kindly listed some options here. And like you compared, I think that we're not so far behind the Dodgers, I don't think, at this point. I think that Zach Wheeler is perpetually underrated. Aaron Nola is a great pitcher, but I think we have a better rotation than them.
The Phillies.
Oh, sorry, yes, the Phillies. I think the Padres, they could have a sneaky good rotation. It really depends on King and Waldron at the back and what they look like. Mm-hmm. And then Cease also is a little bit of a wild card in my mind, so we'll see how he turns out. But I think we are better than that. I think the Mariners have a really good case. With Castillo and Gilbert, Kirby at the top, and then you've got Miller and Wu at the back. It's a pretty good rotation. I won't lie.
Pretty good. They might be my favorite. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I think they might be there, maybe one, and then I don't know. I put the Giants and Dodgers right after that. It's hard. It's honestly so tight with the Braves too. Strider, Fried, Morton, Sale. That's a pretty good rotation too.
I think, and so much is dependent on Sale's health. But if Sale is 90% of Sale, I think that's the best rotation in baseball.
Yeah, I think I might agree. Strider is like, he added a curveball this offseason.
Dude, he looks unhittable.
And I don't know if you saw that. I saw this tweet that was like, all the top Cy Young finishers or whatever from last year, or ERA finishers or whatever, basically all the top pitchers in the league last year are all either injured or rehabbing, or like there's one guy healthy. You think about Verlander, Cole, these guys. I think that there's room for like, the Castillos and Striders and Snells and Webbs to really like shine through this year. So I think that's really exciting. And I think that so far in this pod, we've projected excitement, which I definitely feel. And I think that it's time that we talk about the other side of the coin this week. Shout out Andy Liu from the Light Years podcast, who said when the Renel Brooks Moon announcement came out that they were definitely preceding it with a Snell signing, and that's how it happened. And that kind of has been the MO of the
all off
organization
season. It's been
year.
Bad news and then good news. Bad news and then we make a signing. It's been kind of astounding that way.
But just to address it, in case you haven't heard, which it would surprise me if you haven't, basically after 24 years of being the in-stadium announcer, Renel, her contract was not renewed. The language that the Giants used was that they just couldn't come to terms on an extension or something to that effect. And there's a lot to unpack here. What's like your initial read on the situation?
It's sadness. I mean, it's going to be a very different ballpark experience without Renel. I caught this as you were saying her full name. I've never once called her Renel Brooks Moon because there's no other Renel in my life.
Yeah.
There's no other Renel that I know. She is iconic as a voice in Bay Area sports, as a trailblazer, as an icon. I mean, there has never been a game played at Oracle Park, AT&T Park, Pac Bell Park that she did not announce, and that she was not felt and heard and giving kind of the feeling to that ballpark. So I think in general, I have a hard time knowing exactly what to make of this. We're going to get into some kind of rumors, reports, different things that we've seen, but it's just sadness that a legend seems to be going out in a way that is not completely on their own terms. Even if it's true with the announcement that they mutually parted ways, that still does not say that this person retired when they were ready to retire. And I have a hard time imagining the organization doing that with Kruk and Kipe. And I think she's on the same level as them. So it saddens me that this announcement happened in this way.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I was talking with my brother about it yesterday, and he has a bobblehead of her. Like, she is on the same level as Kruk and Kipe and Flem and Miller and all those guys. Like, she is synonymous with Giants baseball. I've watched baseball in a lot of stadiums around the country, and nobody compares. Nobody compares. I mean, I used to love that the voice of God they had for Oakland. I forget what that guy's name was, but he was great too. But like, Renel is the standard. She does a lot of stuff in the community too. She, does interviews with the players. Like, I loved some series that she's done where she just like has wine and sits down with the players and talks. Yeah. And I also think
Lamont Wade had some really good comments.
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off, but what she represents for Black players on visiting teams, for Giants players. And Lamont talked about how she went out of her way to make her family or make his family feel welcome when he first joined the Giants. And I mean, his first year with us was so impactful. And I think it's impossible to say that her impact didn't help him feel comfortable and be able to perform on the field in the same way. So she has an impact that you can't put dollars on.
But if you were to put dollars on, pay her whatever the hell. Give her a damn blank check and like throw it at her. We went past the luxury tax this year. Like, don't tell me that you can't like work out an extension with this icon. I mean, also thinking about the legacy of, the Giants organization, like being a home for Black players. And that's really shifted over the years. And I think that she's one of the few voices representing that. Obviously now we have Dusty back in the organization, but it's worth maybe examining the past few years, how the organization has changed. In 2020, she was a very vocal person talking about, Black Lives Matter. I was reading, I think, Shea's piece or something, or Slusser's piece about how she was moved to tears by what Kapler did, like, kneeling for the national anthem. And obviously times have changed. Fucking stupid conservatives think that we're a conservative team now because Bomel wants players standing for the national anthem, which I don't agree with.
Silly
stuff. Yeah. But just like, I think that that's such an important thing for an organization based in San Francisco. And let me just be clear that, like, as excited as I am about the Snell signing and everything, it really muted my excitement about it to be, dealing with the news on that same day. We've heard reports that this has been known to, that they were going to separate for a few weeks, which means that they intentionally like put it right before the signing. I don't know. I just find it
I've heard despicable. That even back in November that this was done. And that's a rumor. So that's not reported fact. But there was a really interesting post that I saw on Twitter of Adam Copeland's dad. And Adam Copeland runs KMBR. He's been a longtime host, just became director of their on-air product or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to read this out because I mean, he's not doing this for anything other than to, answer to the frustration and sadness from Giants fans. And said he received this from a friend with ties to the organization and mentioned that it's not his son, it's someone else. It says, Renel's been treated like shit by upper management for years. This person spent half of last season hugging her while she sobbed over the treatment of her. She wanted to stay. There was no mutual and amicable split. Those racist MFers. I've known this was coming since November, but had hopes they'd come to their senses. But I guess she was fucked from the beginning. Strong black woman who has an opinion and speaks her mind. A big red flag to her white supremacist boss. And I think that is the very important context that we have not mentioned just yet. But Charles Johnson is an old, rich, white billionaire who has very consistently, and there have been reports and conversation about this in the past, contributed to some really heinous right-wing politicians. That ideology does not represent San Francisco. It doesn't represent the Giants. But it can't not be part of this, right? I mean, their treatment of Renel is, again, comparing, I think, to Kruk and Kipe. They've, bent over backwards to accommodate Kruk and Kipe, especially Kruko lately with his illness. And it's very clear they don't view Renel in the same way. And you have to make, I think, a logical assumption or guess that there's motivation there.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've been reading, it seems like McGowan's death has really impacted the way that the top brass in the org are operating. What I do know about him is that he loved the city of San Francisco. He really worked hard to keep the Giants in San Francisco. And you look back at the 2000s, the 2010s, and we didn't always have a winning product on the field, but people came and watched Giants games because it was a classy organization that respected its players, respected its fans, respected its front office. I think that baseball at the end of the day should be an escape from everything. Do you know what I mean? It should be a place to just go watch athletes do what they do well, eat a damn Sheboygan bratwurst dog, crab sandwich, whatever you
Not
want.
a Sheboygan.
But just have a good time. And I think that it's really unfortunate, the narratives that have played out this offseason. And I think that this one is separate, but not unrelated to the way to everything else that's come out. We want to be talking about baseball on this podcast and what baseball players are doing, what the baseball people who are paid to do baseball things are doing. But everything is political at the end of the day. There's politics that are involved in everything. And I think that it's worth discussing in this context because it really is reminiscent of the erasure of black voices that we see time and time again in this country, and kind of the sanitization of outspoken black voices. The press release was ahead of the 2024 season, Giants name Renel Brooks Moon public address announcer emeritus. And it's who gives a fuck?
It's such a transparent, awful spin. And it really assumes that we're too dumb to see through it. And I think that is so offensive in and of itself, let alone what the actual thing is. But
right. I mean, it reminds me of, the way that we talk about MLK in this country. Do you know what I mean? He was that's the guy who advocated for civil rights in the right way. And he was nice and nonviolent and whatever. And it's such a sanitization of things. And it's what she represents in this organization. I'm holding out hope that she might be rehired. I've seen that there's some people that share that view. I don't know if that'll be true. We saw "We Want Renel" signs in the spring training game yesterday, people calling in and stuff. And the article about her leaving that Grant wrote, that's honestly so beautiful. If you have an Athletic subscription and want to read a perfectly written piece, it has almost as many comments as that, if not more now, than the Davis article. And thinking about how the front office, and I think we should also talk too about how the front office and Johnson and co are distinct in this. The goal of the front office stated, maybe a little bit, they were pushed into it, but is to establish some continuity in this lineup, make a compelling product that you want to root for. And it's who's easier to root for than Renel? Who represents continuity more than her, as you said, who's been there since the beginning of this ballpark opening? And so I just find it like so tone deaf of a way to deal with this. And I think, like you're saying, the most insulting part obviously is what they're doing to her. But then secondly, it's thinking that we're stupid enough to be like, whatever, Blake Snell's here, so I don't care. It's like, no, that is not what being a Giants fan is about. It just doesn't like rub me the right way.
I think this is a good time for a break, not to forget about this, but there's a time and place. Stay tuned after this quick break. So to end today's pod, we're going to go through some kind of quick hitters. Hitters like baseball. Get it, Evan? And wow, 2 awful jokes today.
You need to have a child so that you can be allowed to say stuff like that.
But the first one I want to mention is JD found a home. We talked all about this last week. It's funny. I told you this, I think, offline, that I had been at the A's Mariners spring training game last week. And with my cousin Thomas, shout out Thomas, who had seen the A's a couple times that week already, he was like, this A's offense is pretty decent. All they're missing is a third baseman. And I was like, who has a third baseman we could give away? And that was before he got released. So I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, what were the terms on that contract?
It's 1 year, 2.5, and it could escalators to 3, I think. I'm happy that he found a home quickly and didn't linger in free agency. I think he deserves that. He obviously is losing a couple mil there. I think, as Pavlovich noted on Giants Talk, being able to play every day, I think might actually be a silver lining in the situation for him. The Giants exodus of unwanted Giants players to the A's has been so funny this year. Alex Wood is the opening day starter for the A's. I'm sure it'll be a point that will bring them all together to talk shit about the Giants for this season. I will say,
Scott Alexander will be there like, I was kind of, I didn't have a problem. And they're like, shut up, Scott.
I feel like Scott Alexander says like a word a day. I don't know. That's just the vibe that I get. But I think, the A's seeing their social media team blocking comments on everything that they post is pretty embarrassing. And it must be really frustrating as an A's fan right now to be like, how invested can you really be in the on-field product when they've been so, fucked off of it? So anyway, happy for JD. Happy that he's in California still too. And best of luck to him. He's a good guy. Seems like a future coach. And I'll be rooting for him.
Doesn't have to move and gets to, build up his stat line for next offseason. Stoked for him. The next bit of news in spring training, Alex Cobb is going to be facing Cubs hitters on Friday. He's projected to do 3 innings. Is Alex Cobb going to be ready for opening day? What the hell is going on?
I think he wants to be. It seems like Melvin keeps saying May 1st is the date he keeps hitting. I think it's sometime in April to May. I mean, it's impending for sure. And honestly, it's pretty astounding. I don't know the technical aspects of like what he's had to do to, recover from this, but I imagine that a big part of it is putting in a big old bucket of elbow grease and putting in like a lot of effort and time into doing this because, he at the level that he's at in his career or his age and where he is as a vet, like he easily could have just taken it, slow played it, just come back for the second half, like we're seeing with like Kershaw or something who's injured at the beginning of every season and then comes back. But that's a big, big boon for the rotation, even before the Snell signing. And then with the Snell signing, it just only makes it better. I think he faced minor league hitters.
He did
earlier this week or at the end of last week. And obviously it's minor league hitters, but got 5 strikeouts over a couple innings. And Roger Munter said he looked good. And I trust that man. So it's really exciting news.
Yeah. Roger had a note in his like camp notes that was like, he's been seeing all these minor league pitchers and then Cobb steps up and it's like, oh, this is a big leaguer. Like it's
Yeah.
just popping. And that goes to show, I think, what we were talking about before of like giving our young guys time to, eventually pop, eventually, find their stuff. But also just excitement for him. I mean,
when Cobb comes back, like I don't know how they'll sequence things exactly, but like the idea of like Webb, Snell, Cobb, Harrison is like
bruh.
just the
And
left right
Hicks,
of
dude.
that is awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then you get
it's
Hicks at the end.
filthy.
That's really fun.
I love the idea, and this is putting the cart before the horse in many ways. What a weird saying. But Robbie Ray, if everything goes like really well with our rotation the first half of the year, having Robbie Ray come back and us being like, I don't know where he fits, would be the greatest of problems to have.
Yeah. Totally. And I mean, like, this gives him, like, he really should take it. I think also with Cobb, like, don't rush back into it. Like, when you're ready, come back. Yeah. We have the depth to, like, pick you up. Same with Ray. And, like, that's so great. I'd love to talk about Luis Matos, too. He came back with a big old dinger yesterday. And I'm seeing a lot of people making the argument that he should be on the opening day roster. Do you think that he should be on the opening day roster?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter. I'll note too, it's like fans, not necessarily beat writers, say that Matos should be starting opening day over Conforto or Yaz. That's just not how baseball teams are run, unfortunately. It's spring training stats, and you cannot put too much credence in spring training stats. I am a huge Luis Matos fan. I feel this way with Luciano and Matos, that I'm like on the side of not throwing them into the opening day roster, but mostly because they're still 22-year-old kids who don't have to perform for us right away. Conforto and Yaz are struggling in spring training, but that could mean anything. If they are struggling through the month of April, if either one of them are, then yes, we need to have a conversation about Luis Matos. And he is absolutely our first call from AAA, which means that he should be in AAA getting live reps every single day, not being a fourth outfielder. People have also been like, he's better than Slater. And I don't care about that. Slater is so great for that role in a way that Matos is not good for that role of fourth outfielder, basically filling in across the outfield. So I think it is a very well-intentioned point from Giants fans. I just think it is misunderstanding how a roster is constructed and how you use the players that you have.
Yeah, and I feel like he's going to make his way on the roster at some point. And I feel like there's a lot of Yaz and Slater hate, as you have kind of alluded to. And like, really take a look, watch Mike Yastrzemski like play right field and like appreciate that. And then if he gets too creaky, Slater gets too creaky, then Matos is right there. And it kind of reminds me of Steve Kerr's kind of philosophy on how young guys step up. And he's had a flawed season, let's be clear. But I think when you look at somebody like Kuminga and his rise with the Warriors this year, part of why it worked, and obviously there's some drama and Kuminga had to fight for himself in it, but Kerr's kind of approach is very much like, I'm going to make the decision when it's undeniable that it's time to make a decision. And I think now the way our roster is constructed is such that we can put young guys in when it's undeniable. When, Schmidt, Luciano, Matos, Ramos, these young guys are hitting the cover off the ball and are fielding their positions well, then it's time to bring them up. We were like kind of jumping the gun a little bit because of need this year, which is like fine. And like, that's a rebuilding kind of like attitude. But this is a much more competitive way to build a team.
I think the Kerr point too is really good for the veterans as well, because a guy like Klay Thompson needed to have it prove to himself that he needed to come off the bench this year. He couldn't have started the year coming off the bench because he would have been in his head about what that meant about his own abilities. And so Kerr stuck with him longer. I mean, I think a lot of Warriors fans were like, Klay should be coming off the bench. And it needed to be Clay's decision as much as Kerr's, because if Kerr makes this decision without him, then I mean, you're seeing kind of the Crawford situation play out, which we did. But I think the Giants in that way, Melvin is such the right manager for this team because he's going to stick with Conforto and Yaz until there's a point where they go, okay, it's May 15th and we need you to be batting better than 150. And, if that's happening, the organization will do something about it. They're not above 100%. That. But I also, to your point, I think I would be shocked if both of those guys were batting 150 by May 1st. It's like they're professional hitters. Spring training stats may make it look like they're struggling, but you never know what guys are working on or trying to, I'm reading curveball spin or, whatever. It doesn't have anything to do with what they're going to be like in the regular season, because when they have a spot confirmed, they're not trying to win a spot. So they're doing what they need to do to get ready for the season. So,
yeah, I mean, like Webby's been struggling this offseason a little bit when you look at the results, but it's like, get back to me when Kruk and Kuiper are on the call and we can evaluate more properly.
Exactly. Yeah. Are we pretty much set? I talked about this a little bit last week on our pod, but are there any roster battles right now?
I think the only thing really left is our lefties in the bullpen and who's going to take that role. I think Small was kind of ticketed for it and then he got injured. Amir Garrett hasn't been lighting it up necessarily so far. So I don't really know who fills that, but I'm not really so concerned about that battle. I mean, the back of the bullpen, you cycle through all the time anyway. And we've got the Rogers twins. We've got, Duvall, and we've got Jackson, who's I think hopefully going to be an underrated part of the team this year. So
and Ryan Walker,
I think for the most,
stud.
Ryan Walker too. Not to let me put some respect on his name, but I think for the most part, it seems like Fitzgerald was always going to happen, and it seems like he's in there now, which I'm happy to see. So I don't really see that much up in the air unless that there's a surprise injury in the next week or two.
Yeah, I agree. Is late night Lamont back?
I think he's majorly back. I think that he's a sneakily big part of the team this year. Yeah. I think in a different way. I think he was there last year, but you could kind of forget that he was there. But he had a walk-off hit last night, and he's got a penchant for that type of stuff. And I think you guarantee him having a good season by bringing Renel back. So that's
Giants,
that's how I want to end this.
I like that
campaign. I'm sure the Johnsons heard me talking and they will make that decision now. But do you want to preview a little bit what we're going to do next week?
Yeah. So I care about the Willie Mack Award more than anyone I know. And
I think anybody in the world.
Well, I'll accept it. But my partner Amanda and I have, for the last 2 years, I think, done a preseason bet on the Willie Mack Award, where we pick 3 people who we think might win it. And then if one of those people that we pick wins, the other one buys them a jersey of that player. So I, and maybe why I care about it, have won the last 2 years, much to the chagrin of Amanda, and picked Tyro last year and got a jersey of Tyro, which I wore very proudly to Scottsdale Stadium on Wednesday of last week. So Evan and I are going to bring this to our podcast, and we want you, the listeners, to participate with us. So next week's show, Evan and I are going to announce one pick each for the Willie Mack Award. The Willie Mack Award will explain in much more detail in next episode, kind of what it represents, who's won in the past, how it's voted on. But we're going to make our picks, and then we would love for people who are listening to send us via social media. We would love you to call into our voicemail that we have and announce your pick and maybe even why you made that pick. I think a more helpful timeline would just be before opening day. Give us your pick, and then if one of us gets it, one of the two of us will purchase a jersey for the other one. And if one of our lovely listeners gets their pick right, then Evan and I will send you a jersey of that player, bragging rights forever, and maybe an appearance on the pod too. So there's a lot on the line, boys and girls.
A lot at stake. Yeah, I'm excited for that. I've been watching from the outside as you and Amanda have done that, and I'm excited to be participating this year. And just wanted to say, as always, thank you for listening. It means a lot to us that you'd give us an hour of your time to talk Giants baseball, and we're really excited for the season ahead. Again, like Clark said, leave us a voicemail, 415-320-7269. Follow us at Foggy Seagull on all socials, and we will see you next week with a new episode of Foggy with a Chance of Seagulls. Goodbye.